Mr. Yonikan, there is an opinion, especially among our diasporan compatriots, that Pashinyan is changing Armenians' political course and is leading more and more towards the West. As proof of such change of course, the following acts or events are brought as example. The arrival of EU observers to Armenia for the next 2 years, and the alleged refusal of help from CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is known as HAPC in Armenia.
On the surface, it may look like Pashinyan is moving towards the West. It may look like that. However, that's not true. And why does it look that way? Because the moves and the examples that you brought, I would say he was forced to do. He had no other option. It's not that Pashinyan wanted to do that, but he had no other option. For example, the issue with the observers, the European Union observers, they didn't ask Pashinyan if he wanted them or not. They just sent them. Now, Pashinyan can't say, hey, don't come. I didn't ask you for that. But he even did that. And I'll tell you how. For example, when France brought the issue of observers to the Security Council, Armenian representative says, no, just give the Russians a bigger mandate.
Oh, I remember that.
You remember that? So in a way, that's same as saying, look, don't come. We don't need you. Just give the Russians, let the Russians do what they're doing. This is what he was saying. And every single time he says, give the Russians the mandate. Why doesn't the UN give the Russians the mandate? Now, the Europeans or the UN looks at Pashinyan or looks at the UN representative of Armenia and says, is he stupid? We are considering Russia a terrorist state, and we're going to give the terrorist state a mandate to be a peacekeeper? It's same as if you appoint director of a kindergarten someone who's been convicted of child molesting, of child rape. Would you put a rapist in charge of a kindergarten? You wouldn't. Same as here. Would you put a rapist, terrorist, killer, Putin, in charge of peacekeeping Armenians in Artsakh? I wouldn't. So, and this is, and when Armenian representative at the UN gets up without shame, without conscience, without morality, says, give the Russians a bigger mandate or give them a UN mandate, because they don't have a UN mandate. They're self-proclaimed peacekeepers. Nobody proclaimed them as peacekeepers. Only UN can give a mandate for peacekeepers, and UN has not given the Russians peacekeeping. It was an agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which Azerbaijan never signed. Only Armenian signed for the peacekeepers. Aliyev never signed for those peacekeepers. So now UN is saying, you decided, and you make your soup, you eat it too. You eat your own soup. You made it. So as far as the European observers coming here, again, I repeat and I insist that, number one, Armenia did not invite them. And number two, they came here without asking permission. They just said, we're coming. And by doing that, the European peacekeepers put Nikol Pashinyan in a position where he had no choice but to accept them. Because at that point, the only thing was left for him to do is to not allow those European observers to cross the border from Zvartnots airport into Yerevan. At the airport, the Russian patrol guard would have said, you guys are persona non grata because Pashinyan does not want European observers in Armenia. Therefore, you cannot enter. But they couldn't do that. That would be too much of a scandal, an international scandal. It would. I mean, for someone who follows the affairs of the world and events in Armenia, it's very obvious to me. But to many people, to many average Armenian people, working people who have their own thoughts, how they're gonna, the kid is going to school, the parents are sick, they have work to do, they got to go to work, they don't have the time to look into this in more detail. And they just see, as I said, it seems as if he's going to the West, because on the surface, it looks like that. Because if you just put the title that European observers came to Armenia, you say, wow, Nicole must have said okay, but he didn't. As far as HAPCO, the OSCTO or CSTO in English, the abbreviation, there, the interesting part is that to make it look like, again, this is manipulation of people's minds, to make it look like as if the Pashinyan's government or Pashinyan is against CSTO, which he should be for all obvious reasons, to make it look like that, he had made this a mirage type of a thing where certain collaborators, individuals who work with Pashinyan, who are under the umbrella of pro-Western, they threw this thing, they are against CSTO, that they want CSTO out of Armenia. But till this day, Nikol Pashinyan has not kicked them out. Till this day, Armenia is part of CSTO. And they made this issue that they made demonstrations, speeches, that since CSTO does not abide by their own rules, since they do not honor their own obligations under the CSTO agreement, which is to defend Armenia's sovereignty and the borders, internationally recognized borders. So what does the CSTO say? They say, well, we don't know where the Armenians' borders are. So imagine this, they're supposed to protect us from within our borders, but then they say we can't protect you because we don't know if this is your house. And they say, well, show me your document, right? And what are you going to show them? You're going to show you Soviet maps, Soviet Armenia, that Soviet Armenian maps go this way? Well, guess what? From 1920 until Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, 71 years, in those 71 years, even Soviet Armenia borders changed a number of times. So CSTO wouldn't excuse that they don't know where the Armenian border is, but they do know very well that the Armenian border is at the Zvartnots airport, and the Russian KGB agents are standing there checking your passport. They know that border, but they don't know the border in Jermuk. So they don't know if Jermuk is Armenia or it's Azerbaijan. So this childish little game, like I didn't know, again, I didn't know, I don't know where it is, left Armenia in a position where it had no choice. Pashinyan had no choice to do that démarche, little one, saying that, well, guess what, we can't agree to this because you don't know what you want. So Pashinyan was saying the obvious, but the minimum. But the important thing, which is to get out of CSTO, he didn't do. And he didn't do this, again, by putting false information out there that it's not that easy, you have to apply, it takes time. That's a lot of bull, as they say in English. No such thing. Because agreements are such that if one party to an agreement does not abide by the conditions of the agreement, then the other party can suspend their membership in that agreement. In other words, in this case, the other parties are the other members of the CSTO who did not abide by the agreement. They did not defend our borders. Whatever their excuses, it doesn't concern us. Their excuse is their excuse. They did not do it, then Armenia unilaterally and immediately can suspend the agreement. Suspending the agreement is done by just announcing it. By the way, being a member of CSTO is not something like it's my shoes that I have to take off and give it to someone. No, you just say, I'm not a member anymore. I suspend my membership. You're a member of a gym, for example, right? You paid your dues for a whole year, Gold's Gym. And then you say, I suspend my agreement. I don't want to be a member anymore. They say, fine, don't want to be a member. They don't have to. They don't give you the money back, but you're not a member anymore. Same thing is with CSTO, suspending the agreement. You don't have to dissolve the agreement. You don't have to make it invalid. You don't have to go to court to say it's valid or not valid or something is wrong with that. You don't have to make demands in court that they have to come and defend you. No, you can't force Russia to defend your borders. You can't. It's not a court issue. So all you can do is you can say, I suspend. I'm not a member. And Nikol Pashinyan didn't do this. And he could have done this. So that whole other thing that they did this, he threw the paper or the other one threw a pen. He looked at very angry. He said some bad word or whatever. These are all smokescreen. The important thing, he could have suspended and he didn't do it.
Yes, the facts speak about themselves. Nikol Pashinyan says that we must sign the peace treaty. Otherwise, there will be another war. Aliyev says the same, insisting that Armenia should accept the fact that Artsakh is part of Azerbaijan. Otherwise, there will be no peace. What is the way out of the current situation and what solutions does BEVER offer?
I have already answered this question somewhat in the beginning. I'll repeat it from a different angle. Nikol Pashinyan is correct that if we don't sign the peace treaty, then there will be another war. That's a given, because if you're not in peace, you're in war. However, we could also say that the war never ended. So we are in war now. So it would have been, instead of saying if we don't sign, there'll be another war, it could have been maybe better say if we don't sign, the war will never end. Because this will go on. If you remember, I was saying they can shut the gas, they can turn it on, they can open the road, they can close the road. Each time they open the road and close the road, you have to go back to the UN Security Council again, because that first order was for the first blockage of the road. 2 months later, after they open today, 2 months later, they close it again. We have to go back to the court again, get another order, because that court order is not for eternity. It's for this event. So another event is considered separately. So that closing the road, closing the gas, closing electricity, that's war. War is not just shooting with guns. War is cyber war, internet war, gas war, road war. These are all war. Putting sanctions is war. Cold war mentality is the sanctions. So Armenia's war is not going to end. We're never going to have peace with Azerbaijan or Turkey until we force them to accept peace. It is in their mentality. It is also not just in their mentality, but we have to also, Armenians have to understand that Turks or Azeris, to me, are the same, in this context, and Armenians can't go together in one place. And for a simple reason, because it's the same house that both want. The example before I was saying, your house, I live there. Now I want your house. I lived there for 100 years, but I want to be the owner. I want to take away that house from you. So I will do anything and everything to kick you out of your house because I want to be the owner. This is the mentality of Turks. And this is not a new mentality. When the Seljuk Turks first time, 800, 900 years ago, came to this part of the world, that was their mentality. They came to conquer, they came to take your house away from you. And they did that little by little, little by little. They have a lot of patience. Azeris have a lot of patience. Azeris understand that if things go the way they are now, if we don't have a final peace, and to them final peace means something different, to us it means something different. They know that time is in their favor. Why? Now we have 120,000 Armenians who are victims and who are hostages. They are hostages of Azerbaijan. Now they are going to use those hostages against us. And by using those hostages, the Armenians in Artsakh, they're going to make their lives miserable. By making the lives of those hostages miserable, those hostages, at every single small opportunity that they get, they will leave Artsakh. So there is a big concern that if the border, that road is open, we may see an exodus of Artsakh Armenians. Because it's understandable. If you are in there, and it's easy for us to talk from Yerevan, where cities, restaurants are open, bars are open, people are laughing, singing, cars are passing by with loud music. And at the same time, you say only a couple of 100 kilometers away, Armenians are in a blockade and they don't have supplies, they don't have medicine, they don't have food, kids can't go to school, and they are going to be in that position endlessly. It's not going to end. So the only way to end that is to force the Azeris to come to an agreement that is favorable for us. And the only way we can force the Azeris, and in this case, it's not just the Azeris, but we also have two other powers behind Azeris, Russia and Turkey. The only way to force them to give up, so to speak, give up with their aggression, because they are the aggressors now. If they close the road, they're the aggressors. If they shut the gas, they're the aggressors. The only way to stop the aggressors is if we have new and more loyal allies. Because our ally, which is the CSTO and Russia, have proven over the years, time and time again, that they're not reliable. Not only that they're reliable, where they're indifferent, but on just the opposite. They are very reliable for Azerbaijan, and they're doing everything in their power to afford Azerbaijan their victory. So that's why Aliyev feels very comfortable, and because he understands that he has Russia and Turkey behind him. And Armenia is left with no allies. Armenia is left with a treasonous ally, Russia, that is not helping Armenia. So the only way out of this situation is for Armenia to get new allies. What is getting new allies would mean for Armenia? First of all, Armenia has to come out of from under Russian control. And it doesn't have to be in one day, it could be in stages. First thing is CSTO. Second thing is the customs union with the Soviet ex-Soviet republics. The third thing could be the Russian base. And during this process, as we become less and less dependent on Russia, the Europeans and the Americans are waiting to fill that vacuum. If we don't fill that vacuum, and the Russians are going to leave sooner or later because they are losing in Ukraine and they lost, Russia is gone back 30 years ago. That's the Russia now. The way they were in the 1990s, that's the Russia now. Nothing works there. They can't produce anything. They don't manufacture anything. They have no technology. Everything is bought from other countries, and the other countries all put sanctions. So Russia is kaput, as they say. So we have to fill that vacuum because Russia is leaving the area. Not because they want to. Russians never want to leave, but they're going to leave. So the question here is, when the Russians leave, who is going to fill the vacuum? For Russians, the best choice for them is Turkey. So as weird or unlikely as it may sound, that's, from the Russian point of view, that's the best candidate. Because Russia looks at it this way. If we leave this area, who is going to come in? It's either Turkey or the US. US, Europe, together. For Russia, it's better to have Turkey. Because Turkey is not only their ally, but is also a Siamese twin. Russia and Turkey are Siamese twins. You cut one, the other one dies also. So Russia can't survive without Turkey, and Turkey cannot survive without Russia. They need each other. That's the reason why they want the Zangezur corridor, because that's going to be their landline. That's going to be the umbilical cord that's going to feed the Russian military needs through Turkey.
And I just remembered that we have a saying, white Turks, that refers to Russians, actually.
White Turks, that's right. And so we have to look for new allies. And we are lucky that the national interests of the European Union, European countries, and the United States coincides with the Armenian national interests. By the way, an ally, countries are not allies because they like each other or they love each other or because they like Armenian eyes or whatever. You know, it's not simple things like this. Countries are allies because they have interests that coincide. And those interests are not permanent. Those interests can change over time as interests change. For example, I'll bring one example of how interests of one country in one place is with one country, other country. In another issue, it's against it. Israel is a good example. Israel is an ally of Azerbaijan. By being an ally of Azerbaijan, it has automatically becomes an ally of Russia and Turkey, because Russia and Turkey are also allies of Azerbaijan, right? But in the Mediterranean Sea issue with the gas, Israel is in an alliance with a group of other countries which are against Turkey. So when it comes to Armenia, in this area, there are allies with Turkey. But when it comes to another geographic area, a different issue, completely different issue, they are enemies of Turkey because they cannot divide the gas in the Mediterranean. And their consortium or a group of allies are Egypt, as unlikely as could be that Egypt is an ally of Israel, and ally of France in the Mediterranean, ally of Greece and Cyprus. These countries are together against Turkey. So that's why national interests are very tricky. Another good example of how interests coincide. The north-south road, which is designed to counter the China's Silk Road. And if you can imagine, China's Silk Road goes east-west, and it crosses Caucasus, and it goes from the Caspian Sea to the Black Sea, and doesn't cross Armenia, doesn't come down to Armenia. On the other hand, what they call the Indo-European route, which is connects India to Europe. The connection from India to Europe goes through Iran. So it's India, Iran, Armenia, Georgia, Black Sea, Europe. Now, this road is in the U.S. interest, because U.S. is a competitor of China. So this is countering China's Silk Road. China's Silk Road goes this way, north-south goes this way. And guess what? Armenia is in the middle. So U.S. interests are with the north-south or Indo-European route. Guess what? Iran's interests are also for that road. So we can say that on this road issue, Iran and U.S. are allies. On other matters, they're enemies. But in this case, they will be allies. And if Iran looks at this issue as a national interest issue, which I think they do, sooner or later, Iran will find a way to deal with the U.S. in order for this to work. We're going to benefit from that. India is going to benefit. Why is India in it? Because India is a competitor of China, just like U.S. is. So whatever is in the interest of China is against the interest of India. India and China are natural enemies. As I was saying, their allies could be national interests, because there's no, not for your blue eyes or beautiful eyes, they become your ally. But natural enemies are because of competition that is going on for millennia. As long as we know in history, China and India were always in competition. They were never allies, as long as we know in history. And in the near future, they're not going to be allies either. They're going to be competitors. So this is the geopolitics of allies and finding allies. And for us, we have to move by our national interests and not by the Russian national interest, as all these past four governments in Armenia for the past 30 years have been doing. Past 30 years, Armenia has been working for Russian interests, not for Armenian interests.
And unfortunately ruining our future.
Yes.
And the last question is, Mr. Yernukyan, in the next context that Russia for the past 100 plus years had a hostile position towards Armenia. What effect will the International Court of Justice decision to recognize Putin as a war criminal and order his arrest have on Armenia, and by extension to the Russian-Armenian relations?
It has a direct and indirect effect. Indirect effect is the weakening of Russia. As far as Armenia is concerned, indirect. For Russia, it's a direct effect. For Armenia, weakening of Russia is an indirect effect. Weakening of Russia means that they will be going out of this region sooner. Why is this weakening of Russia? Because this is similar, this verdict, this decision to consider him a criminal is the example I want to bring. Putin, in all respects, is what they call pahan. he's a mafia boss. Because the Pakhan is a mafia boss in English translation. So he's a mafia boss, and he's now he has been declared as an by again I want to be comparison of a mafia boss. A mafia boss has authority, and his authority is his word. If the mafia boss says something, and it has to be done. If his subordinate does not do what the mafia boss says, that mafia boss loses his power. And once the mafia boss loses his power, his subordinates will kill him because he is useless anymore. Because the mafia structure is a pyramid. If on top of the pyramid, the guy who sits on top of the pyramid, the mafia boss, if he cannot control what's below him, he's useless. So the people below him will try to bring someone up who can replace that ex-boss that who has no authority. He has no respect. His subordinates do not respect him because of this. Not just because of this, but this is the last nail in the coffin, so to speak. So that's weakening of the Russian pyramid. And when the Russian pyramid, I meant the elite or the governmental pyramid, right? Once that's weakened, his chances of survival are less, and the chances of finishing him off within his own ranks has multiplied a few times, which makes our region more susceptible to turbulence. Because when things are not good in Russia, in Moscow, we feel it in Armenia. And this is what I was talking about before, about the vacuum that's going to be created when Russia physically leaves the area. And when Russia physically leaves the area, we're going to be in a lot of turbulence. And there's danger that Aliyev may take that opportunity to not start a full-scale war, but he will definitely make our lives miserable. For him, killing 2 soldiers here, 3 policemen there is what he wants. That makes us always worry. That makes us always in this defensive position. It doesn't allow us to grow. It doesn't allow us to think big, because we're always thinking how to defend those 2 soldiers, how to defend those 3 policemen. You know, this is the mentality that he wants to keep us under. And that is going to get worse with Putin's demise. We can't stop Putin's demise. Putin is, as I said, kaput. Sooner or later, he'll be completely finished. And we are in danger in that respect. The good point, or the good side of this, is that Europe, with their observers, and the United States, with their very subtle but very strong support of Armenia, I believe that that vacuum will be filled by Europe and the United States, and that vacuum will not be filled by Turkey. So this is in connection with Putin's verdict, how it's going to affect Armenia. And if we look at it, it's going to weaken Russia. Weaken Russia means sooner they're going to leave from here. The sooner they leave from here, the sooner we're going to have the turbulent stage, but which is inevitable. We can't avoid that turbulent stage. If any fools in Armenian government think that by giving away more land to Azeris we're going to live better, that's a dream it's not going to come true. They're never going to be satisfied. So we're going to have this turbulent period that we have to do our best to maneuver and truly change the vector, not the way Pashinyan is doing, but truly change the vector towards the West. And and hopefully, but I also believe that under this government, under Putin's, Pashinyan's government, that's not possible. He's too far gone into the cracks of Kremlin. We can't get him out of there. So I think Armenia needs a new revolution. This time a real revolution, not a fake one the way it was done in 2018. By the way, when I say fake, I don't mean the way people approached it. Armenian people had a real revolution in their hearts, but people like Pashinyan stole that revolution and changed it into a fake one, because the results of it were fake. Because it was all on empty promises. A revolution is promises to change things, and the revolutionaries promise that they will do this once they do the revolution. Nikol Pashinyan promised, and he didn't keep any of those promises. That's why I call it fake from his point of view, from what he did, but not fake as far as what the Armenian people did. Armenian people, truthfully, with their whole heart, went and believed the liars, and they did that revolution. An example of a good example why it's a fake revolution, as far as Pashinyan is concerned. At the time of the so-called revolution, or 2018, he was for Sasna Tsrer. He made statements: Sasna Tsrers are not terrorists, Sasna Tsrers are liberators, they're freedom fighters. I know them personally.
His speeches.
Yeah, I know Arek Gurelian personally. I know this guy personally. He next thing he was going to say, I'm Sasna Tsrer. That was all left for him to say. So he was doing all that. Now, who were Sasna Tsrers against? Sasna Tsrer were the liberators against this Serge Sarkisyan's regime, which supposedly Nikol Pashinyan toppled, right? Nikol Pashinyan toppled. Serge said, "You're right, I'm wrong," and he left. Now, the same people who 2 years before, in 2016, were against Serge Sarkisyan, and Serge Sarkisyan put them in jail and for criminal acts. You cannot put a revolutionary, you cannot judge a revolutionary for criminal acts. A revolutionary does revolution. It's an uprising. It's a revolt. A freedom fighter is not a murderer, or is not a thief, or a freedom fighter is freedom fighter. You want to put him in jail for being a freedom fighter, say so. But Serge Sarkisyan put all these charges, criminal charges, against those guys, and guess what? Nikol Pashinyan, who was supposed to be, quote unquote, the revolutionary, who came out against Serge Sarkisyan, continues on with the same policy or the same position that Serge Sarkisyan started, and made it even worse. Serge Sarkisyan did not dare to call the Sasna Tsrers terrorists. Nikol Pashinyan dared. Nikol Pashinyan, not himself, those words didn't come out of his mouth, but his old party members and everybody else around him whom he pushes to do that, they started to call the Sasna Tsrers terrorists. And they even changed the law in mid-trial. By the way, the trial never ended. They're still continuing to judge those guys, including myself as a what do you call aid and abetting taking hostages and occupying buildings. This is the charge: aiding and abetting, taking hostages and occupying buildings. Now, that charge originally did not involve terrorism.
Yeah.
Now they changed the law they put the word terrorism in it. So retroactively, the act was in 2016, now with 2023, 7 years later, retroactively, they want to pin the terrorist label on those guys. And this is who? This is the same guy who was saying they're not terrorists, they're freedom fighters. And taking this opportunity, I'd like to mention that we have a fundraiser going on through National Democratic Alliance's website for the, at this point, out of the 32 Sasna Tsrer who've been charged for various crimes, the ones I mentioned, you know, hostage taking or occupying buildings. Out of those 31, they've been charged. 8 or 9 of them are in jail because their verdicts were passed down already a year ago. And on Armenian Independence Day last year, May 28, 2022, with the orders of Putin that Nikol Pashinyan willingly abided by, they arrested those guys and they are in jail. So we're doing a fundraising for to support their families and for them. For our diasporan Armenian compatriots who may not know, Armenian jails are not a picnic place. The jails are never a picnic place, but consider that if you're in France or in US, Armenian jails are about a, I spent 2 years in Armenian jails, so I can say it from a first-hand knowledge. Armenian jails are about 20 times worse than any European jail that you can think of. And medical care is limited to Band-Aid and aspirin. If you need to have an operation done, it will not be done in time because there's so much bureaucracy that you may end up dying in jail before you get your operation. And when it's done not at the level of expertise or at the level of care that an individual should need. And of course, the families of those jail people who have lost a family support, a breadwinner, are in dire needs. So in the past, National Democratic Alliance has been supporting the guys in jail and also their families for all their needs, starting from actually food, because we take them once a week food to the jail because the jail food is not edible from practical reasons. And for regular toiletries, I mean, you name it, everything we have to supply from our own. In the past, we had specifically made donations for the Sasna Tsrers, which have been delivered to them. You know, somebody would make a donation and say, please pass this on to so-and-so. And we did that. And whatever was not covered by specific donations, National Democratic Alliance did it from their own pocket, so to speak, or from the general budget. But now we have decided to do a fundraiser, and I urge our compatriots to be generous. This is not this part is not a political issue. It's more of a humanitarian issue. It's for the human rights of those jailed freedom fighters, whether you agree with their methods or not. But I don't think there's anybody who can disagree that their mind, their heart was for the freedom of Armenia. And by looking at that from that perspective, they sacrificed themselves for us, and the little that we can do is to support them and their families in this time. Some of them have very young kids. Arek has a young kid. David, I'm sorry. I forgot the name, but two or three have young kids. When I say young,
Doesn't matter,
couple-
still.
yeah, few years old. Anyway, we look forward to your support in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yon, again for accepting our invitation, and hopefully our polite broadcast will have acceptance among our diaspora, and we will continue our line. Thank you for visiting us.
Thank you for inviting.